Welcome to In All Honesty, the podcast where we get real about life and all the problems that come with it. I'm Michelle Elman, and I'm that friend who we all know is a little bit too honest. You might not come to me when you get back together with your ex, but I'll be there for you when it all goes tits up. Welcome back to In All Honesty, and this week's episode we are interviewing Christina, who is the editor of my brand new book, Bad Friend, Why Friendship Breakups Hurt and How to Heal. And I'm so excited to speak to you because I've been joking online that this is the greatest love story that's come out of this book. But I actually think it's such a beautiful story that I did just want to tell people the story.
Yeah, it's a very special story.
So this book was a long time in the making. It's probably the longest I've sat on a proposal because one thing after another was going wrong. First of all, my original editor of my last two books went on maternity leave, and then my agent left, and then that publisher got bought by another publishing house, and then I had a 3-month termination clause from my agency, so then I couldn't even find a new agent. Then I found a new agent, and then it was like October, November, and I was like, I can't pitch a book out like in December. This is not going to work. So it was like, okay, beginning of the year, we'll pitch the book out. And I was really disheartened at the response around friendship of like, especially considering my last adult book had been around dating. It felt so different with dating being known as this priority. And then I was getting these responses of like, well, she never talks about friendship. Lie. Go find my post from 2014.
Didn't follow you.
Well, so this is the point. Christina followed me.
So hashtag stalker.
But then I got really disheartened by it because I was like, why are you judging my writing based on the content I'm posting? But also, I was heavily promoting my dating book because the paperback had just launched. So I was like, if this is not proof that I heavily promote a book when it comes out, but also, why are you judging whether to give me a book deal based on my following and because I was never that kind of author. And then also there was this theme of like, well, friendship doesn't sell, and I was like,
interesting.
I don't know any woman who hasn't been through a devastating
100%.
but it's kind of proving the point that I was writing about.
That's what I was
going
to say. Like, it proves the point that it's needed.
And we went out, and to be fair, I had the most amount of offers out of all of the books that I've ever pitched for this book. The thing was, I'm just going to say it wasn't matched with the money I was getting previously.
Right.
And that's where I was like, I do too many jobs and I have too many hats that if it's not the money I want, I'm just going to say no. And I was kind of at that point. And yes, it was wonderful because...
I didn't know that.
Oh, sorry.
Your agent's going to kill you.
Oh, no.
No, she won't. No, she won't. No, I love your honesty.
It's important to say that when it comes to female empowerment, I am not going to work for lower than what I believe I am worth. And I believe I earn a certain amount of money. I have evidence to prove that from my previous advances. And I might be willing, if I'm really passionate about something, to go slightly lower. But there is a point where it's insulting and rude. And also, I actually believe long term it leads to less respect in the industry. And every time I've lowered my fee and my rate, I have come to regret it because I do think it translates to whether people treat you with respect.
And like a lack of investment.
So whether I should be saying this or not, I was getting to the point with my agent where I was saying, look, an auction's wonderful. 3 offers is brilliant. No one's really getting the concept, first of all, which I really need to be understood when I'm like writing. And 100%. I'd had such a good relationship with my old publisher as well, and my last editor as well. Unfortunately, they couldn't take me because they literally had restructured the company, and she was now an editor of a different branch. She's now an editor of illustrated books, and I obviously don't write illustrated books. But it was the fact that I was like none of this feels right. And so we're on the last week of the 3rd round of our auction, and my agent goes to a party and happens to mention in a circle, which is why you get people on your team who speak highly about you when you're not there. And she's in this circle, and you take it from here. So she's in a circle, she's talking about my book, and what do you say?
Yeah, so we were just having a catch up, and I said, how are you? How are things? And she said, oh yeah, having an auction for Michelle Elman. And I was like, oh my God, yeah, I know that she left her previous publisher because it was in her newsletter, her Substack. And then your agent was like, what are you talking about?
Another thing my agent will absolutely kill me for. And I hesitated on publishing that Substack because I'm a really big believer in lifting the lid around publishing industry, influencer industry, all of it.
Because it's such a closed industry.
But it sometimes works against you to be so transparent, especially around fees, especially around advances and numbers. And it wasn't a positive newsletter, really. It was me going, oh, the proposal and the pitching process. It's the first time I've gone out wide in a few years, and I hate it. Like, because it's so vulnerable. And what going out wide means is you can go directly to your old publisher and say, here's the book. And that's usually what happens if you're happy, which is what happened at my last 2 books. Was I was really happy I stayed. And then obviously now, because I had no choice, I went out wide. But going out wide means going to all the editors in the UK, having all of those meetings, getting a lot of opinions, getting a lot of like, okay, but you need to change this. And it's the closest you get to when it comes to being an author to a job interview, I would say.
Yes.
And most times it's me interviewing them because I already know they want the book by the time we have a meeting.
Yeah.
But it is trying to find, it's a little bit like dating. It's trying to 100%. Find that perfect match. And I was trying to remember this last night.
Yeah.
We met before the offer, right?
Yes.
Did we? But we didn't meet in person.
We met, we had a Zoom call. Yeah. So after the party, I hung out with Megan that night.
Megan's my literary agent.
Shout out to Megan. And then she sent it to me the next day. And so she was like off the back of our conversation.
And we were closing. And the funny thing is we were closing the next day and I hadn't heard from Megan, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
And so I was like, something's happening. Because otherwise I would have heard like, hey, the auction's closed. Here are the final offers. And we had 3 at the time. And so I was like, oh, okay. Wonder what's happening. And then I was like, I was really in a phase of life of like, let's just trust the universe.
Yeah.
If I haven't heard from Megan, there's something. And then the next day I get this email being like, so I have some amazing news. The thing you've been wanting. And the one thing I was saying to Megan, which I hadn't found, was I was like, I want someone who knows me inside and out. So it has to be someone who actually follows me, who's actually read my books, who actually likes me as a writer. I don't want to have to convince. I think the problem is when you do my hybrid kind of job, there is a perception of me as an influencer author that I'm more influencer than author. Right. But now that you know me, you know, like being a writer is like in my bones. I'm not saying I'm a good writer. I'm saying like...
Well, you are a good writer.
Well, thank you. But I also...
Just to reassure you.
I really appreciate that my editor believes that. But my most confident thing about being an author is not that I'm the best writer in the world. Right. I don't believe I'm going to be winning literary prizes. But what I do believe in is I have things I want to say and I can communicate them in accessible, understandable ways to large audiences because I'm dyslexic. And so if I don't make sense of it in my brain, you're not going to, which means that the books I write, it's not going to be like, I'm always the kind of writer where if there's an easier word and a simpler word I can use, I will choose that word. And as a result, it's not going to be the most literary book, but it is going to be a very... I think you failed writing a self-help book if you get to the end of the book and the question you have in your head is, great, I agree with you, but how?
Yes.
And so every chapter, hopefully this echoes through the whole book, is I'm like, if this chapter is not answering how, and like even my chapter titles are very literal, I'm going to answer one question.
Which I love.
And this, and also like even in working with a new literary agent, I realized like, Megan highlighted to me the fact that I have like 40 chapters in all my books is very unusual. And I was like, it's because I'm dyslexic. And I was like, that chapter needs to be so narrow in my head. And like one of my chapters is, what if you hate your friend's boyfriend? And that is literally all I'm answering in that chapter. If I'm talking about something else, that will go in a different chapter. I don't care how other books are structured. That's how I structure my books because that's how my dyslexic brain works. And I believe that makes it accessible to even people who are non-neurodivergent or have like a very normal brain. That's what I've always been passionate about. And I think I wanted someone who understood that. And I wanted someone who understood like my passion is life coaching, I almost didn't realize how being an author and writing has always been in my life until I became an author.
Yeah.
And I think it's because when you grow up dyslexic, it's really hard to believe you are good at that stuff.
Yeah.
And it was so knocked out of me. I was a kid who loved reading. I used to read in the dark. My parents used to be like, you're going to get glasses one day. And I did need glasses one day because I was always reading in the dark. And then one day I got told you're reading too young for your age. And that made me stop reading for years.
Yeah.
And then it was the fact that it took me slowly discovering that, I really like reading my psychology textbook.
Yeah.
That got me back into reading nonfiction.
Oh, wow.
And then I only really started reading fiction when I was 21.
Yeah.
So it took about 10 years to
Yeah.
realize. And then now it's so part of my core that like I only process through writing, even if it's just writing in a journal. Like my
that's
books
fascinating.
are therapy. Like this book has been so therapeutic.
And I see them as therapy for everyone who reads them as well.
I hope so.
Yeah.
So when you got this, when you heard about the subject of like friendship breakups, what was your first thought?
So it kind of like was a bit like a punch to the gut because I have gone through a friendship breakup that was like very traumatic, and friendship itself has been a topic. It's had a moment in publishing, and I think friendship is obviously important to us, but the missing part of that conversation is friendship breakups.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's something that everybody experiences. It's got that pure
This
relatability.
is why she's my editor. You know why?
Yeah.
Because one of the notes I got from a lot of the people I was meeting with is it's too narrow. You need to go broad.
wow.
It needs to be a book about friendship. And I was like, that's been done.
See, that's the opposite. I was like, this is exciting because it's a fresh take on friendship.
Yeah.
And it's still a celebration of friendship, why it's so important, why we need to respect friendship.
That was why I paused on the proposal. So my biggest fear was, how do I make a friendship breakup book not depressing? Because it is depressing and it is heartbreaking and it's heart-wrenching. And how do I... And it was the thing that clicked in me, which hopefully comes across in the book now, is... I only care about this because I care about friendship so much.
Yeah.
And like, I am getting my heart broken so much because I'm still trying to persevere in wanting those friendships. I still have that hope. I still have that belief that those good friendships exist. And then it was in writing the book, I went, actually, to go through heartbreak and love again in a platonic sense.
Yes.
Is a brave and vulnerable thing to do.
Definitely. Yeah. 100%.
And so that's where like I do hope it comes across as a positive book, and actually
it definitely does.
It's the joy of friendship too.
Yeah.
The joy of friendship is because you believe in having the best friendships, and as a result breakups are a part of the package.
Yes, exactly. It's like if you want to have a conversation about friendships, we also need to tackle friendship breakups.
It wasn't just me. It was the topic as well.
Yeah, it was.
That was interesting.
But I have followed you for so many years because I had your first ever book on submission when I was at a different publisher.
Wow. So that was 2017.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I've been following you ever since
but you
then.
didn't offer it.
No, I didn't. But because I felt it's
just call you out.
Confrontation. No, basically because at the time I felt it kind of... I wasn't sure I had a vision to publish it. And I think if you don't have that vision, you're not going to do it justice.
A lot of people were confused around my first book because I was becoming known for body positivity, but it was a chronic illness book.
Yeah.
And that's where that book struggled because I always thought it should have sat in the vein of When Breath Becomes Air, medical trauma book.
Yeah.
And that's where I think it comes across in the publishing of that book, that I believe that book is so beautiful, but the cover and the title confuses people what's inside.
Yeah, like a slight missell.
Yeah, and so that's why the reviews are amazing for it.
Yeah.
Because people are like, wow, I wouldn't have picked up this book.
Yeah.
But people aren't picking up the book. And they're shocked by what's inside. But that's actually misaligned, where like actually the cover and the title. The cover and the title of Bad Friend is exactly what it says on the tin.
Yes.
And all my books since, because sometimes you do learn lessons the hard way in the publishing industry. All my books since, I have been very clear to be like, it says what it does on the tin.
Yes.
And if it doesn't say it in the title, it will say it in the subtitle.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that's a really clear messaging thing that
Definitely.
you do have to... With every book, I think there are things I would have done different, but I kind of accept each book as a time capsule. So
exactly.
You've been following me since my first book.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
But it's so funny because if you go into our DMs, there's DMs. I've been sending you DMs for years, like as a fan. Like I remember one so vividly. Do you remember during COVID, the first lockdown, and you were kind of very positive and reassuring?
Yeah.
I messaged you saying like, oh my God, just like watching you every day, watching your stories is so reassuring during this time.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So I remember there were two things that Megan said. Megan said once, Megan's my new agent, my old agent, Hayley, who I also love. And again, I'm not working with her simply because she's now working in fiction, but like Hayley has been my agent for like 7 years. You had messaged Hayley and said, oh, because my old publisher got bought by the publisher you were working at, you were like, oh, I can't poach. Word for word, it says, I can't poach Michelle Elman now because we're under the same house.
I know, yeah.
And I was like, and Megan told me that. And then the other thing was that when you applied for this job at this publisher, I was on your
you were on my
board.
list, exactly.
Yeah. When was it the job interview?
Yeah, I did like a big strategy document, and it was like vision for the role, for the imprint, and then authors.
The authors she specifically wanted under dialogue, under your imprint, Renegade.
Yeah.
She wanted me.
Yeah. Yeah, literally. Like, because I felt that you're such an asset. I'm obviously so excited about you and your career. And I felt like you just needed a publisher to really get behind you.
You probably won't like that I'm saying this publicly. But you've also said it's because you feel like...
I'm like, what are you saying?
Publishers... You've said my books could have been done better in the past. And I actually love that honesty. And it was probably one of the main reasons I signed with you. Also, the better money. But because I do believe in getting paid what you deserve. And frankly, like, if it's going to take away time from social media, if it's going to take time from the podcast, it's going to take, it needs to compensate. Otherwise, I'm not scared of rejections. This is the thing I think that's interesting about the author industry. I think a lot of authors are scared of rejections. Yeah. But because I had 4 rejections between Am I Ugly and The Joy of Being Selfish, which I talk about openly because I think it's important to. Yeah. I was okay.
Because it's a massive part of publishing.
And I was okay saying no. And there is one book in those 4 I, to this day, still wish was published. I don't think it ever will. But like I was,
well, you never know. We can save it.
Well, I think it would be a step back now because I see these books as time capsules of me at the time. I'm not the same person anymore. But I do think those 4 books was my almost like my training ground in being an author of like, do you really want to be in this industry? You published one book because it was like I published that one book and I just caught the writing bug. Writing Am I Ugly and was like, I never want this to stop. Yeah. And then it was like basically the universe saying, are you serious about that? Here's rejection. No. I remember saying to Hayley at the time, like, when are you going to fire me? Like, and she was like, it doesn't really work like that. But like, I do believe in you. And I'd had that from my agents. I'd never had that really from the publishers where I've actually had that relationship with an editor. We're talking regularly. And like, Christina will tell you, I am in her WhatsApp all the time. I mean, if people looked at the hours we send texts,
I know,
it's ridiculous. It's like 2 a.m. Like, hey, by the way, can I just check?
I love that though.
But also, this is kind of what I've wanted, and I understand to some people it's really bad work boundaries and all of that. But I was like, I think a better book is made when we are talking.
Definitely.
And I think. I mean, you've seen how bad I am at emails. I write my emails like text.
But then you write long emails.
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know
say that, but then you write long emails.
Do I?
No, it's not a bad thing, but I always found it interesting. Yeah.
No, my emails are like kiss kiss at the end. Like I write it like Tess. I'm like, absolutely, kiss kiss. But yeah, the fact that we've had an aligned vision, we care about this topic a lot.
There's like an implicit trust between us, I think, from the very beginning.
And then also you just have that longitudinal... Great authoring right now. But like this long-term understanding of me and my journey over the years. Yeah, it's resulted in a great... Like, it's been really satisfying working on this book. Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about that friendship breakup? That kind of...
Yeah.
I feel like Christina's tearing up right now. No, like, I don't want to talk about it.
No. I'm over the trauma.
Yeah.
I'm healed.
Well, how long ago was it?
It was probably around 6 years ago, maybe 7.
My one that started this book idea for this book was 6 years ago.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. And it was off the back of me. So I have a chronic illness, ME. And so due to being ill, lots of friendships shifted and changed because I was no longer the person that I used to be. And with that came a lot of friends falling by the wayside, some that I felt disappointed me because I wasn't showing up in the same way that I'd always shown up. Like I felt disappointed by them and let down and not really seen, all of that sort of stuff. And there was this one particular friend who I just felt constantly overlooked. And I felt that because I wasn't the Christina that she was used to, I felt dropped. And then it was a combination of that kind of again and again. And then her asking this guy out on a date. I think I'd been friends with him for more than half of my life.
Yeah.
He's like a lifelong friend.
Or just be honest.
Just be honest. And the thing is that she wasn't honest, and I found out through him. And when I confronted her about it, she continued to lie. And then she kind of twisted it around saying that he's a dickhead, he's a fuckboy, all of these things. And I just felt like he's my friend. He's the one I trust. You're the one that's let me down. But it all exploded at a wedding, at my friend's wedding.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it was like...
So like high volume, like yelling and screaming? Or
we're yelling and screaming. So
wow.
On the train there, so I just found out about her going on the date. I'd spoken to my guy friend. He said, look, I really didn't know. Like, of course, I won't see her again. She had been lying to me. And on the train there, it was in Cornwall. So I was like traveling from London to Cornwall. I was like nervous of seeing her, and I was like, I really don't want to cause a scene at this wedding. So I just wanted to avoid her. And then she chased me around the whole wedding. So many times I said, I don't want to discuss this here. I need space. Yeah. Let's drop it. I saw we were sitting next to each other, and I quickly flipped around the
name tags.
Yeah, the name tags. And she just wouldn't let it go. And she pushed and pushed and pushed.
Oh
and I tried to escape her so many times. And then until the end, I just exploded. But it was outside and not that many people were around.
Well, that's good. But
even after that, she kept on chasing after me.
But I think also, like, for me with any of these, and ultimately one of the main messages in this book is the fact that if she had been honest with you and said, I really like him,
yes.
I'd like to go on a date, would that be okay? And you might have turned around and been like, that's not okay. And then she'd be like, okay, well, I'm weighing up this choice and I'm choosing this.
Yeah.
And if it's at the cost of the friendship, then that's the decision I've made.
Yes.
Like, to me, that's even a better way of going
about it
than to like avoid it, hope you never find out.
Exactly.
Especially because when you go on a first date with someone, you'd hope it's with the potential of like going further. But this idea of like, well, wait and see whether this is actually going to turn into something.
Yeah.
I think the lying does more damage than the actual like
behavior. That was it. I think it was the lack of communication.
Yeah.
And then lying afterwards. I just felt like that was completely unnecessary.
So the friendship breakup, it was my ex-best friend that started this book. I was giving a talk on Christmas, and if anyone who knows me, I'm a massive Grinch, and so it was already my idea of hell. And I had warned the brand that I was giving a talk on Christmas, like, oh, by the way, I'm a Grinch. I'm probably going to say this on stage. But as a result, wasn't particularly looking forward to going to a Christmas event on Saturday morning at 10 o'clock in the morning. And she had thrown her house party the night before, and her boyfriend had said like a number of rude things at the house party. And one of them,
the story's in the book, isn't it?
The story's in the book. And also a lot of what my thoughts afterwards are in the book. One of the things that her boyfriend did during this house party was publicly announced to the entire room that I'd got with his best friend, and then sexually offered me up to his best friend in front of all these strangers. It was just so rude. It was disgusting. I was mortified.
Yeah.
And I was like, everyone's drunk right now. He was a notoriously bad drunk. And I was like, ugh, he's not my friend. He's my friend's boyfriend. I'll deal with it in the morning. And then in the morning I was texting. I was like, hey, that's not okay. Like, I want an apology. And she just completely denied it, accused me of being jealous.
No. Yeah.
And then she just stopped replying. And we were on the way to this event. And by the time I had arrived at the door, I was just in floods of tears.
Yeah.
And who was at the door waiting for me was Megan Crabb, who is the person who has written the foreword of my book. And
I didn't know that.
She was on this panel with me.
Yeah.
And I turn up and I'm sobbing. And she's like, what happened? And I was like, my best friend just broke up with me. She's not replying. Like, she's just ghosted me. She like mopped my face up, made sure my face was okay. We tied my makeup on. We went on stage. I put my phone backstage, and I remember the entire time I was on that panel, I was thinking like,
Yeah.
I really hope I come off and there's a text from her.
Yeah.
And by coming off stage and realizing there wasn't, I kind of was like, I think that's it.
That solidified it.
But I remember walking away from that event with Megan and going, it's so frustrating that actually I had to like tidy myself up and walk in. And I didn't mention it to anyone, but if I just had an 8-year romantic relationship end,
Yeah.
I would have been met with compassion and sympathy. But if I went in there and
Yeah.
said, my best friend of 8 years just broke up with me,
Yeah.
I would sound like a 13-year-old in a playground.
Yeah.
I word for word said that, and those words are now in Bad Friend.
They
because
are.
that is the thing that started this whole book, was I was like, why does it feel like I'm a 13-year-old on a playground? Why is this not a more valid feeling?
Yeah.
Why is this more legitimate? Like, why? It pissed me off. Like, I was like, and to be honest, a lot of my book ideas come from because I want to like right a wrong in some way. And I feel like that's where I was like, no matter how many people were like, friendship doesn't sell, I was like, you're wrong. You're just wrong. If you go into any of my comment sections around friendship breakups, everyone has a story. And just as you said, I've never told this story. Most people have never told their story. It's all I've been hearing for the last 8 months while writing this book. I go to events, they're like, what do you do? I say I'm an author. I say I'm writing a book on friendship breakups. And they pour their heart out and tell me all these vulnerable stories because they've never shared it. Because the problem with shame is that it leads to silence.
Exactly.
And so they don't tell these stories. And so I'm really hoping, I'm actually very excited for a world to exist where Bad Friend is like alive and on bookshelves, because I hope it lifts up the shame around it.
Definitely, and starts some much needed conversation.
I feel like it's the conversation we've never been allowed to have.
Yeah, exactly.
And we went back and forth on the title for a while because I was like, is it the right thing?
Is that the title that you had for it, like before you were working with Megan?
So Bad Friend was the title throughout. It's the first time I've had the title from proposal to publication and not changed it.
Yeah.
I never really do the subtitle until it's like finished.
Yeah.
But like the title's the same, and I think my worry around it was the same worry I had at the beginning of like, oh, is it too negative? And then I was like, no, it's the fear everyone has.
Exactly.
Everyone's scared of being called a bad friend.
Exactly.
And everyone's worrying whether they are making the right decisions when it comes to ending a friendship.
And I love how provocative it is, you know. It's not shying away from that.
Well, I'm not shy.
It sums you up.
So we end every episode with something you're learning, something that you're thinking about, something that you might not even have the answer on.
Well, something that I've been learning, and I think is like a continuous thing, is not to worry about things that aren't in your control. Like when change happens, I used to be such a catastrophist and always go to the worst case scenario. And I've just realized as time goes by that you worrying and getting consumed by that doesn't do anything. It doesn't help you. It doesn't get you to the next stage. In fact, it just leads me to spiraling. So instead I'm learning to kind of sit within the discomfort.
How do you stop that usually?
I just have a therapist and I talk everything through with her. And I've learned to see the kind of uncomfortable feelings as an area for growth.
And it's also, I do think that being able to sit in discomfort is a really key part of it, which actually leads me into like what my thing I'm learning is the fact that when it comes to friendship breakups, I'm actually trying to distance more than end a friendship now. Because I think I've seen how as you get older, and I'm not saying I'm old, but like as you go into your 30s, you see how drastically people can change over a decade. And people can really become completely different people. And I even have friendships where like for years it was just almost like teething pains, like niggles or like little jabs at each other. And then one day it just clicks back into place and it's all good again. And so it's sitting in that discomfort again of like, it might not be in the perfect place right now, but maybe the years of friendship has owed this person. One of Christina's editing notes was I used the word grace too much.
Oh yeah.
I was like, give the person grace. Give the person grace.
I was like, we were a bit heavy on the grace.
You find a new word now. And I was like, but I mean it. Like, I do think we all should give each other a lot more grace in friendship.
Yes.
And as a result, there might, if you said, it's so normalized now to say that in a romantic relationship you have 1 or 2 bad years. I mean, we recently had but Michelle Obama recently was saying she had 10 years where she hated Barack Obama.
Yeah.
And I was like, 10 years is very extreme. Can you imagine if we did that in friendship?
Yeah,
of like,
it's
oh,
true.
we had 10 difficult years in friendship.
Yeah.
I'm not saying 10. 10 is ridiculous, even in a romantic relationship. At that point, I'd probably call it quits. But I do think you can sometimes have 1 or 2 difficult years.
Yeah.
And then whatever's going on, mental health, physical health, job loss, whatever it is, grief, you can go through difficult years and then sometimes just click in place. And right now I'm really going through probably one of my most difficult friendships has just clicked in place. And I'm like so grateful and thankful that I didn't end it and actually went through the uncomfortable and the difficult. It's the hard conversations as well.
Yeah.
It's about like facing that rather than just being scared of it.
Yeah.
Well,
Throwing yourself into it.
Yeah.
And giving them grace.
Well, thank you. Grace. You're so sick of that word. Thank God there were no people. All of my names in my book are pseudonyms. There were no people in the book called Grace as well.
I know, yeah, that would have been confusing.
That would have been too much. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for
I'm
having
sure
me.
this is not going to be the last conversation that we have on Friendship Breakups.
Yes, definitely not.
But I have loved working with you. I have loved
me
the
too.
book. And make sure to
Yes.
pre-order Bad
Exactly.
Friend on all the links everywhere.
Yeah.
And the audiobook link should be out soon.
Yes.
And I'm pushing on Christina to get signed copies. And we want to have some like pre-order bonuses and all the things.
Exactly. Cooking up lots of exciting plans.
Thank you so much for listening. And if you enjoyed this podcast, then leave us a review, hit subscribe, hit follow, and we are back next Tuesday.